Okay. As promised, here's my history of ZICO. Yeah, for the unaware, a little while ago, around a month, if I get this out when I want to get this out, around a month ago, I posted my history of Block B. And in that video, I said I wasn't going to touch ZICO, because ZICO is frankly too culturally relevant to be relegated to a history of Block B. Plus, Block B hasn't really been culturally relevant since around 2017, 2018 at the latest, and ZICO's had several #1 hits since then, including several monster hits, so I decided he was going to get his own video, which is this video, K-pop idol or hip-hop icon, the history of ZICO. So, moving right along, let's do my standard shout-out slide, because we must give credit where credit is due. First, the one and only Madam Smoky Glow. For a frame of reference for how long I actually spend working on one of these videos, when I took these notes, she was newly returned to YouTube.com. She's since gone substantially AWOL again. It's been months, okay? I spend months working on each of these videos. I do several at a time, but even so, she's AWOL again. That's not the point. The point is, she used to make these evolution of videos, and I ate them up. I loved them so much, and they're what originally inspired me to make my history ofs, so shout out to her. I will be putting her evolution of playlist and her channel in the description. Next, the bestie. Shout out to the bestie. The bestie tolerates me telling her things she truly cannot be bothered to care about, specifically about ZICO. She does not care in the slightest, but she tolerates me, and also, she's the one who originally told me to make these slideshows, so shout out to her for being smart. Lastly, my bean. I love my bean. I adore my bean. She supports me to a concerningly unconditional manner. Like, it should be concerning how deeply she supports me in this channel as someone who does not care whatsoever about K-pop, but she loves me, and I love her for that. And also, she is the only reason I can make these long videos. If you enjoy these videos where I sit here for me, hours at a time, talking to you about an artist, thank you, Bean, because, like, this is all her doing. Last thing before we really begin is my standard disclaimer slide. None of them are scary, as you can see, but they just help me cover my bases. First and foremost, I will not be covering every ZICO activity. I am not gonna sit here and tell you about the, 100 individual features this man has taken part in. I'm not doing that. I would like to have a semblance of a life. I do not know how long this video will be. I have approximately 25 pages of notes, so it's gonna be a long one. I have coffee, for the record. Look at this cute mug. I believe my sister got me this. Don't quote me on that, but I believe my sister got me this mug. Either way, I have coffee. We're gonna be here for a bit, especially me. I will be here for a bit, and I'm already going to be here for long enough. I'm not covering every variety show appearance. I'm not covering every single feature he's done. I would like to have a life. Disclaimer number 2, no Block B. Again, I made an hour-long video exclusively about Block B. If you want to hear me talk about Block B, you can watch that video. Obviously, ZICO was in Block B. Block B is very relevant to ZICO, but I already did that legwork. I already made that video. I'm not going to be really rehashing it here. Disclaimer number 3, this video is actually going to be excruciatingly chart focused. For me, as a little freak who loves charting and data, I'm gonna be having the time of my life. I had the time of my life making these notes. I'm gonna have the time of my life making this video. However, if you are someone who does not appreciate in my history of when I sit here and talk about almost exclusively charting data, this video is not going to be one you will enjoy. Go watch my gravity video or something. I never talk about the charts in that one. Go watch my Astro video. Go watch other videos I've made. This is not going to be that one. Lastly, opinions at times will be shared. I have opinions about music constantly, okay? There are few things in this world that I have no opinions on. I'm a very opinionated person, so there will be opinions shared in this video. I might say a song sucks, and that's okay if you love that song. My opinion does not have to be your opinion. Alrighty, that's all I got. It is now ZICO time. It is time to start actually talking about ZICO. ZICO. or legally speaking, Ujio, if you want to be a little weird, you can call him that. I don't know anyone who does. But ZICO, he was born on September 14th, 1992, and in 2011 would debut in Block B as the group's leader, main rapper, face of the group. This is not his only group. He would also found the crew Fancy Child. They would debut in 2016. He has also done various other things. We'll get to them as they're relevant. ZICO, fun facts include being the younger brother of Wu-Taeun, who's right there. It was a little awkward, I will concede, according to both of them, when ZICO was a judge on Show Me the Money, and Mr. Taeun would go and attempt to audition. It was awkward. I can see that being uncomfortable. Like, if I was auditioning for something and my younger sister was the judge, I would feel uncomfortable. I would also use absolute nepotism to my advantage, but either way, that's just me. Another ZICO fun fact, he is the male soloist with the most weeks at #1 on both the GON and post-2004 Melon charts, like the actual Melon chart era Melon charts. An insane record, and also is, by many standards, the first real idol that successfully transitioned into the hip-hop space. There have been others, obviously. ZICO was sort of the pioneer of that in a lot of ways. He was the first one to really do it and be big in both the idol world and the hip-hop world. But let's just jump into the timeline and begin pre-debut ZICO lore, which is going to be more accurately mainly pre-Block B ZICO lore. ZICO has been involved in music for the vast majority of his life. He studied in school. He joined SM when he was just a teenager. He almost made it into SHINee. Insane lore, okay? To me, a die-hard SHINee stan, a man who can and one day will go on like a 4-hour-long tirade about SHINee. Get ready for the slideshow era history of SHINee. It will come eventually, and it will be long. But sometimes I sit awake at night, and I imagine a world in which ZICO was in SHINee, and that world scares me. However, SM was not for ZICO. He would leave the label in 2008, ironically when SHINee debuted, and he would very quickly actually claim a major feature not long after. He would feature in IU's Marshmallow. Now, this would mark the first collaboration between the pair. They're friends, by the way. I see people talk about this like weirdly often because I'm on IU Twitter. People will talk about like the weird friendships IU has. IU is friends with ZICO. I feel like people forget that. Also, to be clear, Marshmallow was before IU became the powerhouse she is today. However, the song was undeniably a hit. I would say it got a lot of eyes on ZICO. However, he is not actually featured officially in the song. Like, he's in the song, you can hear him in the song, we all know it's him in the song, but from an official standpoint, like credit-wise, he's not featured. 2010 would see the first official ZICO features. He featured in a bunch of songs that year, largely with Chopd. This is Chopd. Largely with that man. However, they were just a slew of artists, primarily under Stardom Entertainment, which is the label Block B would go on to debut under. Speaking of, 2011 would also see the debut of Block B. They would release their digital single, Do You Wanna Be? Again, this video, not a history of Block B. Absolutely not. That would be a waste of several hours of my life. I made that video. It will be in the description. You can watch it to hear the entire history of Block B. That said, understandably, ZICO would spend the next several years working with Block B. His main focus would be Block B. He would help build the group into one of the most successful digital boy groups of the first half of the 2010s. Good for him. However, it does mean that we're going to skip ahead. We're going to skip ahead to late 2013 when ZICO would really begin to establish himself as an entity outside of the group. Now, I'm choosing to begin our solo tale with the release of Brilliant off of the Brilliant Is album. It would earn ZICO his first ever solo entry on the GON charts. He teamed up with a bunch of rappers. There are a ton of rappers in this song. I've never heard it. I haven't. I couldn't find it on like easily available streaming services, and by that I mean I looked for 30 seconds and couldn't find it, so I didn't listen to it. But I'm sure it's a rap song, and I'm sure I would enjoy it the way I enjoy most of them. But either way, this would earn ZICO his first ever solo entry. As previously mentioned, it would peak at number 75 on the GON charts. However, ZICO's probably more known appearance at the time would be on the song Red Lipstick by Hyorin off of her debut album Love and Hate. This song, much more successful. This song would peak at number 12 on the GON charts and went on to sell around 100,000 downloads, so not bad at all. Also, because I'm here, and this is the opportunity and I'm taking it. I love this song. I do. I adore this song. I think it's so good. I think it doesn't get its flowers enough because no one listens to this damn album anymore. I think it's really good, and I think you should check it out. Jumping ahead a bit, July 2014, ZICO would be announced as the new host of Music Core. He would join actress Kim So-hyun and Minho of SHINee, who you may recall he trained alongside, so that's fun. ZICO would officially host the show until April of 2015, which is ironically when he gets exceedingly busy, but either way, good for ZICO, good for him. A month after that, in August, we would get a crucial moment in establishing ZICO as a solo entity, which was his feature in Beautiful, the debut single by Pak Bottom, and an absolutely massive hit. Now, to be clear, Block B was already very popular when this song came out. They just put out Her. Like, in the timeline of Block B, we are deep into their status as hit makers, okay? However, the people who listened to Block B music were very different from the type of people that listen to Bottom music. Again, there would be overlap, obviously, but this song, in addition to being a big hit, like #2 on the Gaon charts, #1 on the Melon charts, 1 million downloads, like a hit, it also expanded ZICO's audience a lot. It introduced a lot of people who'd probably never heard a ZICO song to ZICO. Around the same time, ZICO would also start appearing on Fashion King Korea alongside June, also of Block B, and alongside other idols like Sunmi. I love Sunmi. This is my opportunity to say that we should all stand Sunmi. Summer 2014 also saw the first time ZICO did any work for Show Me the Money. He would go on to have an insane run on Show Me the Money, but 2014 was the start of that. He appeared on one single for the 3rd season of the show, which was a quasi-remix of That X by G-Dragon. I don't know what to call it. It had, like, it samples it. That's kind of it. But either way, he would be on that song with Ulti, that's Ulti. It did decently well. It wasn't as big as Beautiful, obviously, but it got him a top 40 on the Gaon charts. It sold around 200,000 downloads. It did well. Then, closing out the year, ZICO would officially make his solo debut with the release of the digital single Tough Cookie. Yes, this is the real album cover, and I think it's insane. Let's start with commercial performance, okay? Tough Cookie was not a massive hit. It peaked at #13 on the Gaon charts, #20 on the Melon charts, and sold 300,000 downloads. And for a frame of reference, okay, Extraordinary Woman, a B-side off of Block B's 2014 album, sold 350,000 downloads. So 300,000 downloads isn't ideal, but it is also 300,000 downloads more than it could have sold. Now, let's talk the song itself. I don't like this song very much, if I'm being honest. I think ZICO has a very unique sort of rap pop sound that he has definitely mastered, at least in his great songs. This is very loud rap, okay? It's not my style. It was also rife with controversy, including but not limited to ZICO wearing a Confederate flag in the music video, and him saying the F slur. Yeah, for my own peace of mind, I've chosen not to litigate either of those issues here, so do with that what you will. You can debate in the comments, I don't care. But I'm not getting into it. It obviously didn't ruin ZICO's career. Like, this was his debut. We're what? Maybe 10 minutes into this video max? Like, there's a lot more that this man goes on to do, so I think he made it fine. But either way, I think this is a good time for our first retrospective. So, let's head over to the retrospective corner. Alrighty. Hi. Welcome to the retrospective corner. Now, if you're new here, just to be quick, in these videos, usually I like to end every year with a retrospective. I'm not doing it for every year for ZICO, but I will be doing it for most years. I just think it's a nice way to wrap up each year as we finish it. And I wanted to have a retrospective here because I feel like everything we've covered so far, plus his time with Block B, was really all just laying the groundwork for the ZICO we would know in 2015. Like, it was all just getting us ready for 2015 ZICO. Because ZICO had a bit of a god tier year. I will say, there were like several artists who had insane years in 2015, but ZICO was one of them, and I feel like we need to bring it back. We need to bring back like a year where like 8 different artists just are all suddenly thriving. I feel like we don't have that anymore. Turning our focus back to ZICO though, he was insanely booked and busy in 2015, so let's just go get into that. Okay, 2015 time. Now 2015 is a crucial year because this is the year that I would argue ZICO really goes from being ZICO of Block B to simply being ZICO. And to continue this process, we would get the release of ZICO's second solo single in February entitled Well Done. Now, Well Done would earn ZICO his first top 10 on the Gone charts. It made it to number 9, which is objectively very impressive. That said, it did much worse on the Melon charts. It only made it to number 22 on the Melon charts, which is good. Again, like a top 25 single on the Melon charts is still good, but it also only sold around 200,000 downloads, and in the grand scheme of things, this definitely wasn't as successful as his debut. February also saw ZICO producing for the show Unpretty Rap Star. He would produce Up All Night for the rapper Them. It did decently well, number 20 on the Gone charts, and sold around 200,000 downloads. We would get some quiet time after that. Block B was touring, so ZICO couldn't really be ZICO soloing, but summer things picked up again. On June 10th, ZICO would release his first OST, Sick, a collaboration with Sojourn, as you can see over here, and it was for the show Mask. And in spite of already having relatively successful singles, I would argue this was the first song that ZICO put out that was really a hit, at least with him as a lead artist, if nothing else. It would make it to number 11 on the Gone charts and number 24 on the Melon charts. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, that's just as good as his other singles had done, and you would be right. But you need to look at the bottom of the slide here, okay? Sick would sell 600,000 downloads, his best-selling single ever as a lead artist, as well as charting for 4 months, by far his longest charting single. Then, not long after Sick's release, ZICO would begin his first stint as a producer for Show Me the Money. He was on Show Me the Money 4. He would team up with rapper Palo Alto for their team, and ZICO's team actually quite slight. It included J1 of One Punch and Future YG solo debut Flop fame, and also longtime friend of ZICO and that season's runner-up, Minnow of Winner. And I know I've said this before, ZICO's run on Show Me the Money was insane. Okay, he would release a few singles for season 4, the first of which was Money Flow, a collaboration with Minnow and Palo Alto. And the song did quite well. It would make it to number 7 on the Gone charts and number 14 on the Melon charts, his highest peak on either chart as a lead artist, and it would sell around 450,000 downloads. However, the song from this season that I think we need to focus on is Okie Dokie, a collaboration with just him and Minnow, and one of his most well-known songs even to this day. Okie Dokie would come out at the end of August and was a massive hit for ZICO, okay? It made it to number 9 on the Gone charts and number 11 on the Melon charts, and once again, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, that's just as good as Money Flow had done, and you're right. You're right. But once again, the difference is longevity. This song had longevity of a queen. Money Flow charted for around 2 months, which is impressive. It is very respectable. Okie Dokie charted for 6 months. It was ZICO's longest charting song at this point in his career, and it sold 750,000 downloads, making it his best-selling single up until this point in his career. It is also the first ZICO single we're covering that has good Spotify streams. Now, to be clear, I view Spotify streams very interestingly. I view anything pre-2019 as sort of your state as a classic song, as a song people still come back to. Post-2019, it's much more real-time numbers. This song has 78 million streams on Spotify. An insane number when I tell you this song came out in 2015. Like, 2015 singles do not have 78 million streams. That makes this ZICO's third most streamed song on Spotify of his entire career to this day, and probably because this song is exceedingly catchy. It really is. Like, you hear it and it lives in your head for a week, and I hate it for that because I don't like this song very much, and yet taking these notes, there were several days where I was just humming the chorus because it lived in my mind. Now, the Show Me the Money singles we just discussed came out in August. I think it made sense to cover them first, because we were talking about Show Me the Money, but I would like us to rewind ever so slightly to July, when we would get one of ZICO's most successful features, which was Crush's Oasis. For the unaware, Crush was another artist having a god-tier year in 2015. There were a lot of specifically male soloists that were thriving in 2015. Crush was one of them, and this song was a big part. Oasis would make it to number 5 on the Gone charts and number 3 on the Melon charts while selling over 1 million downloads. It's also just a really good song in general. ZICO's verse in particular is quite excellent, if you ask me. Of this sort of early era of ZICO as a soloist before he was really established, I think this is some of his best work. Turning our attention back to ZICO, on October 19th we would get his latest solo single, Tell Me Yes or No. This song, it's a lot of things. One thing it is a hit. It would become ZICO's highest peaking single on the Gaon charts, making it to number 3. Meanwhile, over on the Melon charts, this would earn ZICO his first ever top 10 single. It would also earn him his first ever top 5. It peaked at number 5 and would sell around 450,000 downloads. Not his best work, but certainly not bad. However, you know what is bad? This song, at least if you ask me. The verses are fine. I can get behind them, but the chorus. Oh, this chorus. This chorus is so annoying to me. It absolutely ruins the song. I can't stand it. But it's fine, because a little over a week later we would get our next feature for ZICO. He would feature in FX's Traveler off of their final album, Four Walls. This isn't a history of FX. I will one day make it. But this is a history of ZICO, so I will say ZICO's verse is excellent and leave it at that. Actually, I lied. I'm gonna go on a little rant, just a little teensy rant for a smidge of a moment, okay? Jay of Day 6 recently, like very recently as of me filming this, was on, I believe it was Zach Sang's show. He was somewhere. And he was talking about how Day 6 named their album Forever with like the U, as in like the number forever, because there are 4 members now. And he was talking about he was hurt. My God, shut the fuck up. I'm so sorry. Like, that sounds mean. And I mean this with no disrespect. You chose to leave the group. I've been a Day 6 fan quite literally since they debuted. I would go get my copy of Day 6's albums if it was physically possible. They're like right there. I have a whole setup in front of me. I physically cannot get to my shelves at this moment without deconstructing it. So I'm not going to do that. But I would like to say, I have been a Day 6 stan. I was a Jay stan. Jay replied to me on Twitter one time. This is a true story. There is somewhere in that man's god-awful Twitter thread a tweet at me. Because I tweeted at him at one point and he replied to me. That's not the point. The point is, my guy, shut the fuck up. You left the group, okay? If Day 6 chose to name their subsequent album, fuck that man, he was annoying as shit, thank God he left, that's their prerogative. You lost any right to comment when you left the group. I have a story to tell. One time, I was helping my friend plan a bachelorette party. Okay, it was like a whole group chat. And I had one friend, my best friend, who was like, I don't want any part of this planning process, okay? I don't care, I'll just show up. She ended up not coming. That's not the point of the story. The story is, she, at one point, I was like, she asked me, she was like, oh, hey, like, what are we doing for this friend's bachelorette party? And I told her. And she was like, oh, I don't like that. Let me try and fix that. And started trying to figure out other plans. And I had to tell her, I was like, bestie poo, I love you. You lost your rights to comment when you chose not to be a part of this group chat. Similarly, Jay, beloved, I would say light of my life, very interesting man, I'll put it that way. You lost your rights to have an opinion on what Day 6 named their albums when you actively chose to leave the group. Shut the fuck up. Do not ask me what just inspired that rant. I don't know. I've been thinking about it for the last few days, ever since I saw that clip of him, so rant aside, we're fine. November 3rd, ZICO released his first digital single album, Boys and Girls. This is the song that made ZICO the man he is today. Boys and Girls was an absolute monster of a hit, okay? It would top with the Gaon and the Melon charts. It would spend a week at number 1 on the Gaon charts and 3 weeks at number 1 on the Melon charts, becoming the number 1 song for the entire month. However, not only did this song have a strong peak position, it had longevity, okay? It charted for 10 months in total. An insane run, and would sell 2.5 million downloads, making it, to this day, the best-selling ZICO single. On top of that, it would even earn ZICO a music show win. He would get a win on Inkigayo. ZICO's never been like a big music show player for the most part, but it got him a win. So good for him. And in spite of having no album sales like that, do you understand how hard it is to get a win with no album sales? Like, it's hits only, and ZICO managed to do it. Probably doesn't hurt though. This song is actually really fun. I do greatly enjoy it. Is it the best thing ZICO's done? No, I don't think it's his best song. I also don't think like it's his best at showing what he can do. Like, there are songs out there that I more appreciate than I enjoy. This is also not that. I just think it's a dumb, fun song, and I've never had a bad time listening to it. However, we are still not done with just the first week of November, okay? On November 6th, we would get one of ZICO's both the greatest in terms of its success and greatest in terms of its quality, his greatest features, which was on Pour Up by Dean. Does anyone remember that tweet that went viral a little while ago that was like, what song is greater than its charting success, right? Or something like that. It was like, what song is greater than its peak position? Something like that. That song is this, okay? Pour Up by Dean did not appear on the Melon charts, and it would only peak at number 96 on the Gone charts. But that's fine, because this song has gone on to become an absolute classic, okay? It has more than 50 million streams on Spotify, one of the highest of a 2015 K-pop song, and is also just widely considered one of the greatest R&B songs from Korean music around this time. That said, I'm also biased. I loved, specifically during this era, I loved Dean. I would say I still really like his music. He's barely done anything. But, like, he had an excellent first mini album. I have that. I'm not gonna go get it. I do have this album, though, which I feel like is one of my few claims to fame. Like, this album sold like ass, in spite of having hits on it, and I have a copy of it, so yay for sign. Either way, on December 7th, we would get our first physical release from ZICO with the release of his first mini album, Gallery. It would contain the 3 songs that were on the Boys and Girls singles album, those are down here, as well as 3 new songs, which are right up here. And since there's album sales to discuss, let us discuss them, shall we? Gallery would actually sell pretty decently well for a male solo album of this era from an artist like ZICO. I know there's a lot of caveats, but it is still true. Gallery would peak at number 4 on the Gone charts and sold around 35,000 copies. As for the digitals, the album was led by the song Eureka, which was a collaboration with Zion T, another artist who was having a God tier year in 2015, and that God tierness extended to his features as well, with his Eureka going number 1 on the Gone charts and peaking at number 3 on the Melon charts. It applied pretty good longevity in the grand scheme of things. It would chart for around 6 months and sold a little over 1 million downloads, which is impressive undeniably. It is a decline from Boys and Girls, but it also came out like a month later. Like, it's good. And with that, we've finished everything I feel like discussing for 2015. I want it known, I've been talking about this singular calendar year in real time for like 30 minutes. I skipped a lot of stuff. Okay, this could have been so much longer, and this is why I don't cover every activity, because otherwise I'd be here all day. But whatever, it's fine. Let's go back to the retrospective corner. Okay, hi. Welcome back. If you watched my history of Block B, you may recall in my 2015 retrospective for them, I said 2015 was focused on the solo expansion, and I think that is perfectly embodied in ZICO. Plus, he did amazingly well. In 2015 alone, ZICO had 6 songs peak in the top 10 of the Gone charts, and his singles, just as like a lead artist, came out to 7 million downloads with all the songs he released that year. And that doesn't include Oasis, which sold another million. Like, ZICO was absolutely thriving in 2015. I feel like a big part of it, to be fair, is the fact that Block B was on hiatus. He didn't have to take time out of his solo schedules to promote with them, and that definitely helped. But with that, let's move into 2016, where thankfully for me, ZICO was less busy. Okay, 26 time, a thankfully less horrifyingly booked and busy year for ZICO than 2015. That said, we do start the year off very early when, on January 25th, ZICO would release a special edition of his debut EP, Gallery. It would contain 2 new songs that were digitally packaged and released as the single Breakup to Makeup. And for once, I actually want to talk about a B-side of this album for a minute. We're going to start off by talking about It Was Love, which is sung by Luna of FX. ZICO is not in this song. He only actually produced it. It is, like, on his album, obviously, but he's not in the song. And fun fact, this song would get a remake done by Tae on Block B's 2016 mini-album, Blooming Period. I could fight myself for days about which version I like more between Luna and Tae. I will never decide. It's fine though, because this song did exceedingly well, both in general and especially when I tell you this was the B-side. Okay? It would peak at number 5 on the Gone charts and number 10 on the Melon charts, and it sold 850,000 downloads, making it the 57th highest selling song of 2016. I'm going to repeat that, okay? This B-side was the 57th highest selling song of 2016. Now let's talk about the title, I Am You, You Are Me, another massive hit for ZICO. This song would go on to top both the Gone and Melon charts with a week at number 1 on both, and would chart for several months, with sales for the song sitting at around 1.6 million downloads, making it the 7th highest selling song of all of 2016, and the highest selling song by a male soloist. Again, I would like to repeat that. I Am You, You Are Me was the best-selling single by a male soloist for the entire year of 2016. Let us all just take a moment and let that sink in. That's enough sinking. Let's move right along and jump ahead to July, because the next few months were very Block B focused. However, July would bring us summer, which means the next season of Show Me the Money, and specifically Show Me the Money 5. Unlike in 2015, ZICO did not function as a producer for the show. He only appeared in one song, which is Beautiful by C-Jam, and it did decently well. It was not as big as his 2015 songs, but it made it to number 8 on the Gaon charts and number 14 on the Melon charts, so it didn't do that bad. However, the next several months were again very Block B focused. Block B was busy in 2016, so we're going to jump ahead to November, which was a great month for ZICO. First, on November 23rd, Sejong of Gugudan and Iowa, she is right there. She would release the song Flower Way. This is the album cover. It's beautiful, by the way. But she would release this song. It was written and produced by ZICO, and it was a huge hit. Number 2 on the Gaon charts, number 4 on the Melon charts, and sold over 1 million downloads. However, arguably more crucially, a few days later, we would get our next ZICO single with the release of Bermuda Triangle, a collaboration with Crush and Dean. And this song, although admittedly less successful than his last few singles, was still undeniably a hit. It made it to number 2 on both the Gaon and Melon charts and sold around 850,000 downloads. I will concede the song did have lesser longevity. All of his past 3 singles had charted for over 6 months, minimum. This song charted for 4. That's not that big of a difference, but it is a decline. However, in good news, Bermuda Triangle would earn ZICO his second solo music show win, with a second win on Inkigayo, so good for ZICO. That's all the ZICO activities for 2016, but I actually want to talk about the awards season really quick, with the brief reminder, because all of ZICO's releases, or at least the big ones, came out in late 2015, they were primarily eligible for the awards in 2016. Cool. So, as always when I do this, I only talk about the big 2, as I call them, which is the Melon Music Awards and the Mamas. Starting on the bottom, with the Mamas, ZICO would walk into the Mama Awards that year with 4 nominations, including for Artist and Song of the Year. He did lose both, but he won Best Male Artist, beating out really big artists like Psy, Park Hyoshin, and Crush. Meanwhile, over at the Melon Music Awards, he would also walk in with 4 nominations, again including Artist of the Year, which he also lost, but he won 3 awards at the Melon Music Awards that year. He won the Hot Trend Award, he won the Top 10 Artist Award, and he won the Rap/Hip Hop Award. In short, ZICO did great at the award season this year, and now that we've covered that, let us return to the retrospective course. Okay, hi, 2016. I think ZICO was honestly a little too powerful in 2016 when you consider how little he actually actively did. Like, casual reminder, for the entire year, ZICO only actually released 3 songs. But I think the best metric for ZICO is to look at his digital sales, okay? In 2016 alone, just in calendar year 2016, ZICO sold approximately 5 million downloads, making him one of the best-selling artists of the entire year. To be fair, part of that is because songs like Boys and Girls and Eureka came out at the end of 2015, but even so, 5 million downloads in a single year is objectively insane numbers for 2016. That also doesn't take into account Block B, who are having a great year of their own. Like, ZICO was really just thriving on all fronts, from sales to awards. Like, he was winning. He was winning in every way. And with that, let's move in to 2017. Okay, 2017 time. A great year for Block B. And they start off the year busy, so we're actually going to fast forward to April when it becomes ZICO time. Alrighty, April 2017. We saw 2 big announcements around the same time. First, ZICO would be releasing his second mini album. It would come out in summer, and that the album's first single, She's a Baby, would come out on April 13th. And this single did great. And it did even better when I point out the fact that it came out within a week of IU's Palette album. Okay? It would peak at number 4 on the Gaon charts, number 2 on the Melon charts, and sell 800,000 downloads. And again, I will repeat, it came out within a week of what is the most successful digitally released album of like the last decade. Then we would get ZICO's first #1 single as just a songwriter, not a featured artist, not a lead artist, not with his group, not anything, just a songwriter. He wrote I Love It for Psy, and that song was a hit. It went #1. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be ZICO. This is obviously supposed to be Psy. Like, that's Psy, right? I don't know who that man is. I don't care enough about Psy to look, so I'm pretending it's ZICO because it amuses me to do so. June, meanwhile, brought us the 6th season of Show Me the Money, and ZICO would once again return as a producer. He teamed up with Dean for Team Fancy Child, and that season's winner, Hangju, even came from their team. However, the Show Me the Money singles don't come out till August, and July would get us our second ZICO mini album with the release of Television on July 12th. Getting album sales out of the way, Television did fine. Okay, it would make it to #3 on the Gaon charts, which is higher than his first mini album had made it. But it sold like half as well. It only sold around 20,000 copies as opposed to the 35,000 his first album sold. However, we should all know by now, ZICO's strength is not his physicals, it is his digitals, and Artist was another huge hit for ZICO, albeit a lesser hit than the massive hits that came from his first mini and its re-release. Let's discuss how Artist would peak at #3 on the Gaon and Melon charts. It would chart for approximately 6 months and sell 1 million downloads, and I want to focus on that last fact for a minute of the 1 million downloads. Downloads in general were on the decline in 2017, and ZICO's numbers were staying relatively stable, which I think is very impressive. That said, Artist, although a big hit, was definitely a drop from his first mini album's hits. It was better than Bermuda Triangle, it was an improvement from that, but if you compare it to songs like Boys and Girls and I Am You, You Are Me, it is noticeably a drop. Anyway, let's turn our attention back to Show Me the Money 6. ZICO would release, or take part in, I should say, several singles for this show. They all did relatively degreeing levels of great, and we're gonna speed run them. Cool? Cool. Starting us off is Yeojun Gang, which came out with the whole Fancy Child team and ZICO and Dean. It was released on August 5th, and it did quite well. #5 on the Gaon charts, #4 on the Melon charts, and sold around 500,000 downloads. After that was Where You At by Kilograms. This is Kilograms. It would peak decently well on the Gaon charts. It made it to #8, but saw a much lower peak on the Melon charts, only making it to #20, and also sold half as well with around 250,000 downloads. Then there was Search by Youngbi and Hangju. It would make it to #11 on the Gaon charts and #19 on the Melon charts while selling 250,000 downloads. It also confuses me. He is in the song, like, to be clear. ZICO is very much in this song. He's not credited in the charting version, like on the Melon charts. If you look at this song, ZICO is not credited as a featured artist, but he is on the YouTube upload. I don't know. I don't know anymore, and I don't care. Anyway, final ZICO feature of season 6 of Show Me the Money was on Hangju's Red Sun. This song would make it to #3 on the Gaon charts, #4 on the Melon charts, and sell around 400,000 downloads. Okay, thus concludes Show Me the Money era, and ironically also our real lore of 2017. The end of 2017 is again Block B focused, so we're just gonna skip that. But before we return to the retrospective corner, we're gonna again speedrun awards season. Okay, warning, ZICO does not do nearly as well in 2017 as he did in 2016, and also a reminder, Bermuda Triangle came out late enough in 2016, it was up for awards in 2017. Cool, starting with the Melon Music Awards, he would go into the show with 3 nominations to his name. Top 10 Artist, he would be up for the R&B Award, and the Rap Award. He lost all 3. Casual reminder, in 2016 he won 3 awards, including the Top 10 Artist and Rap Award. He lost all 3. Meanwhile, at the Mamas, ZICO was up for a bunch of awards. He was up for Artist of the Year, he was up for Best Male Artist, he was up for the terribly named Hip Hop and Urban Music category. I didn't name it, but he was up for it. Anyway, he lost most of his nominations. He did win Best Male Artist, though. He won it for the 2nd year in a row, which, fun fact, made him, at the time, tied for the most awarded artist and the most consecutively awarded artist in the category, so good for ZICO. But that's all I got for 2017, so we will now return to the retrospective corner. Okay, welcome back. Now, I'm gonna make a statement that's gonna sound insane, and it is a little bit insane. But in spite of releasing, or taking part in, I should say, 5 songs that peaked in the top 10 this year, 2017 was a bit of a flop year for ZICO. I think the biggest factor is just that 2015 and 2016 each had one of ZICO's biggest hits. Like 2015 had Boys and Girls, 2016 had I Am You, You Are Me. Two of his biggest hits. 2017 did have Artist, which is undeniably a big hit. It's just not on the same level of hit as his singles off his first album. And that's what makes ZICO such a fascinating artist, because like he'll put out a song that peaks at number 3 and charts for 6 months, and it is objectively a decline, right? It's like IU's new album. I say new like it's not several months old. Her latest album. It did objectively by IU standards flop. However, that is because IU typically charts number 1 singles and its lead single peaked at number 4, similar to ZICO, right? Like, ZICO typically charted number 1s going into this year. His single peaked at number 3. Like, he did great, but for his past releases, by comparison, it was a bit of a decline. And with that, it is time for 2018. Okay, we're back. I took a break, actually. I don't know if you can tell, I took a shower. My hair is currently wet. These videos are cursed. I don't know if I've mentioned that before. I've filmed these types of videos, like really long ones, at this point, pretty much any time of year. And quite literally without fail, the temperature where I live always spikes on the days I film. It's like a scientific fact at this point. So it's hot out for some ungodly reason in September. So I took a shower. I took a cold shower. I got a new beverage. I finished my coffee. It's Red Bull time. But we're going to talk about 2018, which I've dubbed the year that ZICO freed himself from his Block B shackles. That sounds a bit harsh, actually, now that I say it out loud. They weren't shackles, but either way, he would spend the first chunk of the year with Block B, doing Block B activities. So as always, we're jumping ahead. Cool. So, June 4th, 101 released their Undivided mini album. If you are one of the 20 people who watched my Haze video, you'll know this. If you're not, quick recap. Undivided, the whole theme was units. This was the triple position unit. It consisted of Jaehwan, Daniel, and Woojin. I loved this unit because I really liked these two, and I also appreciated Daniel in his ways. So I loved this unit. I loved this album. And ZICO produced a song for said triple position unit. The song was called Kangaroo. And Kangaroo did great, okay? It would make it to number 6 on the Gaon charts, number 12 on the Melon charts, and would even earn triple position a win at the Mamas for Best Unit. Then, on July 30th, we would get Soulmate, a collaboration with IU, their second time collaborating, this time officially a collaboration, and it also did great for ZICO. Soulmate would debut at number 1 on both the Gaon and Melon charts, earning him his first number 1 single on either chart in years. The song would go on to chart for around 4 months, a slightly shorter run for a ZICO single, but it still did pretty great. It was one of the biggest hits by a male soloist of 2018. Also, because 2018 was the start of when the Gaon charts shifted, they stopped showing actual download numbers. I have so many thoughts on that choice that we're not going to get into, but they stopped showing download numbers. I can no longer give you actual download numbers for any ZICO single going forward. So we're going to turn our attention to streaming, specifically Spotify streams. Soulmate has 50 million Spotify streams, a pretty great number for 2018, and it makes it the second most streamed single by ZICO up until this point in his career. And on top of that, Soulmate would also earn ZICO his third solo music show win, once again winning on Inkigai. Now, 2018 was the first time in years ZICO was fully uninvolved in that year's season of Show Me the Money, but it's fine. Because instead of Show Me the Money, we actually got solo concert. He would host 2 shows in Seoul on August 11th and August 12th. These concerts actually marked the start of ZICO's King of the Jungle World Tour, or King of the Jungle, if you want to read it in Korean. These are spelled like J's. So it's King of the Jungle, that's what I call it because it amuses me, but it was his first world tour. We would get shows in Tokyo, shows in Europe, and the tour would end on October 28th with a show in New York. However, a month later, on November 23rd, we would get the official announcement that ZICO was not renewing his contract with 7 Seasons Entertainment. They were the label that Block B was under, and that while the other members had renewed, ZICO would go his own way. He would technically still be a part of Block B, although they've released exactly nothing since this moment, so I'm sure it was a very impactful choice. Anyway, I'm actually done with the lore for 2018. This was a quick year, I will concede, but we're not totally done yet because there are still some award shows to discuss. Now, because the only thing ZICO released during the nomination period was Soulmate. It's not a huge surprise he wasn't up for a ton of awards, but he did still get nominated for Best R&B at the Melon Music Awards, which he ironically lost to IU. Meanwhile, over at the Mamas, ZICO would be nominated for Best Male Artist. He lost it to Roy Kim, but he would win the still terribly named Hip Hop and Urban Music, his first win in the category. And that's all I got for 2018, so let us return to the retrospective corner. So, 2018 is an objectively fascinating year for me because ZICO did essentially nothing. Like, yes, he had his tour, which, good for him. It was about time he had a tour. He'd been massive as a solo artist for years. It was long overdue. But in terms of releases, he literally did nearly nothing for the entire year. Can I be honest? I don't think about 2018 ZICO that often, mainly because, again, he did not do much. But when I do, the main thing I think about is him leaving Block B. I feel like that is the most significant thing he did in 2018, because we established back in 2015, ZICO, when he does not have to take time out of his day to promote Block B, can do insane things, like god-tier things. And 2018, he left Block B, which meant that was going to be the case again. And 2019 is the first year ZICO can do essentially whatever he wants. He obviously had a lot of artistic freedom at his old company, at least I would assume so, but he was literally his own man now. He did not have to answer to anyone, so let's go talk about 2019. Okay, 2019 time. Now, I would say 2019 is the biggest flop year ZICO ever has. It is also one of his least busy years. The first real thing we get is the announcement that he was founding King of the Jungle Entertainment, or KOZ, as I will be calling it going forward. It was his solo label. He founded it at the beginning of 2019, but that's really it, so we're actually going to jump ahead a bit. So, summer 2020, ZICO would once again produce a song for the Produce Group, or a Produce franchise show, producing Move for Produce X101. I said produce a lot in there, and yet I got through it. I'm very proud of myself. Anyway, Move went on to be pretty popular. It wasn't as big as Kangaroo was, but it was popular enough that when X1 would make their official debut, they would actually re-record Move and put it on their debut album. However, September is where things really pick up with the beginning of promotions for ZICO's first studio album, with the release of Thinking Part 1 on September 30th. The album, which was a digital EP, was led by the single Daredevil, which was ZICO's least successful mainline single to date. It would peak at number 16 on the Melon charts. Pretty good in the grand scheme of things, and number 20 on the Gaon charts, which would make it the lowest peaking mainline ZICO single on the Gaon charts ever. It also barely charted. It charted for around 2 months, making it the shortest charting run for a mainline ZICO single since the release of Boys and Girls in 2015. The song also got no streams, no YouTube views. ZICO doesn't really often dominate in those areas, but really all around the song just wasn't doing great by ZICO standards. But that was only Thinking Part 1, and in November we would get Thinking Part 2, which, along with Thinking Part 1, would combine to ZICO's first studio album, Thinking. And I want to switch things up. We're going to talk about digitals first this time around, because the album's lead single, Being Left, did terrible. The song would peak at number 62 on the Gaon charts, and number 66 on the Melon charts, by far the lowest peaking single on either chart. The first one, I will point out, to peak outside the top 25, let alone the top 60. As for the album itself, it would peak at number 3 on the Gaon chart, so just as high as his last album had, but it sold even worse, noticeably worse. It sold 13,000 copies, so not ideal. And that's it for 2019. ZICO didn't get any real nominations during that year's award season, so we're just gonna go back to the retrospective corner. So, 2019 was not exactly ZICO's best year. An artist of ZICO's caliber releasing their first studio album should have objectively been an event, even if that artist is a member of an already very established group. Think Taemin's Press It, okay? Think Taeyeon's My Voice. Canonical event moments in K-pop. ZICO released his first studio album, no one cared. No one paid attention, and I find it fascinating. And frankly, if ZICO had continued on this trajectory, the trajectory we were seeing of him in 2019, he would have been practically irrelevant in no time. He would have been not necessarily like a has-been, but think like a modern day Haze, where it's like you used to be massive and now you do technically exist and you are technically famous, but no one really stands. But it's fine, because it's time for 2020, and 2020 was a wild year for ZICO. Okay, 2020 time. A brand new decade for ZICO to conquer. And conquer ZICO did, because on January 13th, less than 2 weeks into the decade, ZICO would release his latest digital single, a little thing you may have heard of, and if you can read the slide, you'll know. It's any song. Actually, though, there are a few songs from Korea as a country that can properly be compared to any song's success, but more importantly, there are even fewer that could be compared to the song's cultural relevance. This song dramatically changed the entire K-pop landscape and is arguably the most significant release from a Korean artist in the 2020s. For a frame of reference for how culturally relevant just this song was, you know the dance challenges that like every idol does now, all the time? That's any song's doing. This song went massively viral on TikTok, and as a result, dance challenges became immensely popular with K-pop songs. It is also single-handedly credited with revitalizing TikTok in South Korea. The app was going insane in the US in the 2020s, that's true. It had already had its run in Korea. It was already flopping. This song single-handedly brought it back, and with that it brought along the dance challenges, which led to substantially simple choreo, or at least simpler choreo, for said dance challenges, and also made songs substantially shorter. The under 3 minute song runtime, obviously you'll find songs under 3 minutes, that is largely a TikTok thing. That was not really a thing before 2020. Obviously, yes, there are several factors involved in something like the start of an entire trend, the beginning of a revitalization of an app, an entire culture shift. However, any song is widely credited, almost universally, with being the beginning of that change. I was not kidding when I said this song single-handedly shifted the entire landscape of Korean music. But enough about the culture. Let's talk about any song as a song, specifically its success. This is without a doubt and undeniably the most successful thing ZICO has ever been involved in whatsoever, from producing to featuring to his time with Block B to his own solo work. This is the pinnacle. Any song would top both the Gong and Melon charts. Starting with the Gong charts, it would spend 7 weeks at number 1. At the time, the most weeks at number 1 ever for a song on the chart, and is to this day tied for the most weeks at number 1 by a solo artist ever. Meanwhile, over on the Melon charts, any song has spent 8 weeks at number 1, tying the record for most weeks at number 1 since the chart's founding in 2004, and becoming the song with the longest run at number 1 at the time since G by Girls' Generation. In other words, the most weeks at number 1 in over a decade. Also, some charting records that this song managed to accomplish. With its run at number 1 on both the Gone and Melon charts, ZICO would set 2 records. First, he would tie the record for most weeks at number 1 by a male soloist on the Melon charts, and more importantly, he would set a new record for most weeks at number 1 by a male soloist on the Gong charts. The song would also have insane longevity. It spent the entirety of 2020 on the charts, and well into 2021 at that, going on to be the number 1 song for the year on the Gone year-end charts, the Melon year-end charts, as well as being the number 1 downloaded and number 1 streamed song of the entire year. And on top of that, it would earn ZICO his first ever platinum certification. It would clear 100 million streams on the Gone charts, which would make it the only ZICO song to have a platinum certification. Moving away from the charts, I think we've established any song monster on the charts. Let's talk music shows now. You remember how, back when I was talking about boys and girls, I said ZICO is, for the most part, not a big music show player? Yeah, any song's the exception to that. It got 10 wins on music shows, including a Triple Crown on Inkigayo and 3 wins on Music Bank. And I would like to point out that Music Bank win, very impressive, because this song, digital single, no album sales. Album sales are the key factor in winning on Music Bank. ZICO was doing it with digitals alone. Also, more fun facts, with 10 wins, it would make this, at the time, the most awarded song by a male soloist on music shows since Gangnam Style. You know, what was previously the most viewed video ever on YouTube.com. Speaking of YouTube.com. Let's turn our attention there now. Any Song is ZICO's most viewed music video on YouTube. It has 133 million views, which is in and of itself very impressive. The audio track has another 84 million. On top of that, various lyric videos exist with tens of millions more. Like, this song was doing numbers on YouTube. You know where else this song was doing numbers? Spotify. ZICO's Any Song has 175 million Spotify streams. And for an artist that isn't that big internationally, that's an insane number to get. And this is, to this day, ZICO's most streamed song on the platform, and by a pretty wide margin at that. In conclusion, God tier hit. A God tier hit, okay? The likes of which very few can compare to. Like, again, this song was setting and breaking records that hadn't been seen since Gangnam Style, G, like the biggest, most well-known hits of K-pop. ZICO would spend the next few months just kind of basking in the Any Song success glow. This song probably still is paying his bills. He probably made absolute bank off of it. But there was also a global pandemic that started like right after it, so I feel like that was a factor. Either way, we're gonna fast forward a little bit. Cool. So, April 23rd, ZICO would team up with former 101 member Daniel, and they would release For the Love of Korea. I will be honest, Simon, in 2020, like at the time, thought this song was gonna do numbers. Okay? ZICO was coming off Any Song. Daniel was really, really popular at the time. He's still popular, but he was like really popular at the time. I thought she was gonna do numbers. Unfortunately, I was wrong. This song did not chart whatsoever. It got no attention. I feel like nobody knows it exists. It was not doing numbers, in fact. Then, in May, we would get our first ZICO OST in years. He released My Day Is Full of You, a collaboration with Wendy from Red Velvet, and it also made no noise. Didn't chart whatsoever, no one paid attention to it. But it's fine, because on July 1st, we would get ZICO's third mini album, Random Box, along with its lead single, Summer Hate, which was another collaboration, this time with Rain. Starting with the album, Random Box is the only ZICO album that outsold its predecessor. It sold around 20,000 copies, getting us back to roughly television era numbers. However, it did peak way lower. It peaked to number 8 on the Gone album charts. Okay, enough about that. Let's talk about the single. Summer Hate, another hit for ZICO. It would peak at number 2. It actually spent 2 weeks at number 2 on the charts and would chart for 6 months. Summer Hate is also unique in one key area, something I never thought I'd be bringing up on my YouTube channel. This song, specifically the music video, went weirdly viral on horny gay K-pop Twitter. We're just gonna brush right past that and talk Spotify numbers. This song has 16 million Spotify streams. Now, that is a lot less than Any Song got. That's less than a tenth. But, again, ZICO was never like a big Spotify power, and I think 16 million is a pretty respectable number. However, not all is well in the ZICO cinematic universe, because around the time Random Box came out, we would get the announcement that at the end of July, ZICO would be enlisting for his mandatory military service. But before his enlistment, we would get our last little chunk of ZICO songwriting lore, and that is that he wrote the song Beach Again for SOC 3 alongside Lee Hyori. Speaking of Lee Hyori, I love Lee Hyori. I do. I adore that woman. That's in no way relevant to this video, but since I was bringing her up anyway, I figured I might as well share. Anyway, Beach Again was another huge hit. It would spend 5 weeks at number 1, the most for any group on the Gaga chart, in fact, and would close out the year as the 16th most successful song of 2020, again, according to the Gaon year-end charts. Now, for obvious reasons, following July, things get a little quiet on the ZICO front, but we're actually not done with the year just yet. First, in November, it was announced that HYBE would be purchasing KOZ. Now, HYBE is the demon of the K-pop industry, undeniably the only entity that has been more damaging to K-pop than Any Song. I hate HYBE. I say this all the time. One day, I'm gonna make a video, and it's gonna be like 30 minutes long, and it's just an itemized list of every single way in which HYBE has single-handedly destroyed K-pop. This is not that video, but ZICO is, to be fair, the literal only artist that has survived a HYBE acquisition. 17 Sound got way more generic, and NU'EST disbanded, Yota Chingu was murdered. ZICO's the only one left standing. His sound did get a little more generic, but it is still very much ZICO music. Like, you would not hear a post-HYBE acquisition song and be unable to mistake it for a pre-Hive acquisition song. He is literally the only artist that has actually survived a Hive acquisition. Anyway, the last thing I want to do before we wrap up this year is, of course, talk award shows. How do I want to put this? Any song got fucked by Dynamite. Like, fully fucked up the ass, because I would argue up until definitely September, even October really, any song was an absolute shoo-in for Song of the Year. The problem is Dynamite went on to be Dynamite, and at the time of these award shows, it was still like number 3 on the charts. Let's just get into the shows. Melon Music Awards. Going in, ZICO was up for 5 unique awards. Including Artist of the Year and Song of the Year. He lost both, but he did win another Top 10 Artist Award, so at least he got something. Now let's talk Mamas. Going into the Mamas, ZICO was up for 7 awards, including Artist of the Year, Song of the Year for both Any Song and Summer Hate, and Best Male Artist. He lost all of those. He did, however, still win the still poorly named Best Hip Hop and Urban Music category. Also, while I'm here, can I be honest? I'm going to say, no matter what you answer, ZICO should have won Best Male Artist in 2020. It went to Baekhyun, and I logically understand why. He did do very well in 2020, but from an objective standpoint, it should have gone to ZICO. Can we all agree on that? Like, ZICO should have won Best Male Artist. It's fine. I know the Mamas are rigged, but I feel like he still should have won. But yeah, that's all I got for 2020, so we're going back to the retrospective corner. Okay, 2020. 2020 was undeniably an insane year for ZICO. For a frame of reference, do you know the last time a male soloist had the best-selling single of the year? It was Psy with Gangnam Style in 2012. An undeniably cultural moment for sure. And ZICO was really on par with that. Like, he was so massive in 2020. He went from the biggest flop year of his solo career to being bigger than he ever had. Unfortunately, that monster of a year would be followed by a very long hiatus, and because ZICO's in the military for the entirety of 2021, we're actually going to skip to 2022. Okay, 2022 time. Now, ZICO actually still was in the military at the start of 2022. He wouldn't get discharged until April 29th. His first few activities were just some concert appearances. I don't care about those, so I'm not going to talk about them. We're actually going to jump ahead to ZICO's first post-military release. Cool. So, July 19th, ZICO released Soul Drift, and pre-release for his then upcoming 4th mini-album. And this song did very poorly. It failed to chart at all, got no attention, but it's fine. It's fine, right? It's just a pre-release. Well, on July 27th, ZICO released Grown Ass Kid, his 4th mini-album, and the biggest flop of his entire career. The album itself would sell around 16,000 copies, making it his 2nd lowest selling album, but also 4 of his 5 albums all have around the same sales, so pretty standard ZICO sale numbers. The real area it dropped was its peak. It peaked at number 11 on the GON charts, making this the first and only ZICO album to peak outside the top 10. However, the area where this album really flopped was its digitals. Freak, the lead single of the album, failed to chart whatsoever on either the GON or Melon charts. It also did pretty poorly on Spotify. Again, ZICO's never been a big Spotify player, but this song did get under 10 million streams, and for an artist that has like 5 million monthly listeners, that's pretty floppish. Can I just say, I also think this is fascinating. Like, I'm objectively fascinated by this level of floppishness. I feel like this album should have done numbers. Like, it was the follow-up after a huge hiatus from a god-tier year, from 2 massive hits, from one of the biggest hits of the decade so far, and it made no noise. Like, one of the biggest artists currently active had his first comeback in 2 years, and it made no noise. Fascinating. But it's fine, because on September 6th, ZICO released New Thing, a collaboration with the trio Homies for the show Street Man Fighter, and this song blew up. New Thing would re-cement ZICO as the hitmaker he was known as pre-military enlistment, spending 3 weeks at number 1 on the Melon charts and 4 weeks at number 1 on the GOM charts. Additionally, these runs at number 1 would allow ZICO to reclaim the record for most weeks at number 1 by a male solo artist. He lost it to Psy during that, but he was back. He was back at number 1, and he still holds that record to this day on both the Gaon and Melon charts. Moving away from the charts, though, New Thing would also be one of the ZICO songs that did numbers on Spotify. It had more than 60 million streams over there, which I know for a 2022 song doesn't sound like a lot, and you're right, but for an artist like ZICO who does not typically get these big numbers, that's a huge number for him. In summary, a huge hit, a massive hit, and probably calming down a good few people over at Hybe who just bought the company only for it to put out its least successful album ever. Like, I'm sure they were stressed, and I'm sure New Thing calmed them down. Not long after the release of New Thing, we would get ZICO teaming up with B.O. to release the song Complex off of B.O.'s first mini-album, Five Senses. The song, while a flop by B.O. standards at the time, did still do quite well. It peaked at number 12 on the Melon charts, number 13 on the Gaon charts, and had a pretty impressive charting run. However, more importantly, I like this song. I do. I also like B.O.'s music in general. I actually really like his music. Don't tell me if he's a terrible person, I don't want to know. But I like his music. I think the song is excellent. If you haven't heard it, I, for one, would highly recommend it. That's all the mainline lore for 2022. We are briefly going to touch on award season. There isn't much to cover. ZICO didn't get any nominations at the Melon Music Awards or really at the Mamas because his only hit was New Thing, which came out way too late in the year, but he would still win a Mama. He won the Global Music Trend Award. I don't know what that means, but if I was going to give it to him ever, I would have given it to him in 2020, but either way, good for ZICO. And with that, for the final time in this video, we will be returning to the retrospective corner. Okay, can I be honest? I think so. 2022 does not make sense to me. Like, as someone who studies the charts like it is their goddamn job, 2022 does not make sense. If anything, it would have made more sense for the success of his 2 big releases this year to be flipped. It would have made so much more sense if ZICO's long-awaited comeback was the big hit and then his OST was just kind of the non-charter off to the side. That would have made sense. But no, ZICO's actual mainline release, his first album in years, no one paid attention. Meanwhile, he puts out an OST and suddenly is number 1 again. I will concede, New Thing is great. It is catchy. It's a great song in general. I really like it. I streamed the shit out of it when it came out. I understand why it did well. The part I don't understand is why his album didn't. Can I be honest? I feel like no one knows about this album. I feel like no one remembers that this album exists. And again, that's just so interesting to me. Also, nothing really happens in 2023, so I'm actually going to jump ahead to 2024. Okay, 2024 time, our current year, and also a very empty one. Jumping ahead, April would see the announcement that ZICO would be hosting the show The Seasons. The whole gimmick is it has a different host every season. ZICO would be taking over from the queen herself, Ihyori. ZICO's season would be done to ZICO's artist. I know this image says artist with ZICO. I have never seen anyone refer to it as that. I've only seen people call it ZICO's artist, so that's what I'm calling it. But he would begin hosting on April 26th, finishing just about like 2 weeks ago now on September 6th. Also, I need to remind society of something that I am still convinced was a fever dream. One of the guests on this show was Billie Eilish. Like, 2-time Academy Award winning, 9-time Grammy winning, cunnilingus queen Billie Eilish. What the fuck? However, April 26th was a very busy day for ZICO. Not only did he begin hosting his show, he also released his latest digital single, Spot, which would feature Jennie of Blackpink. Now, this video is not a history of Blackpink. I will not be litigating the entirety of everything around Jennie and her departure from YG, but it is worth noting, this song was incredibly hyped up specifically amongst Blinks, not just because Jennie was in it, although I'm sure they would have streamed as a result, but specifically because it was her first release since leaving YG. And maybe it was the Jennie hype, maybe it was the fact that ZICO hadn't put anything out in over a year and a half. I don't know what it was. It was probably a combination of those two things, but this song did insanely well. Spot would top both the Gaon and Melon charts with a week at number 1 on the Gaon charts and 3 weeks at number 1 on the Melon charts, allowing ZICO to extend his record as the male soloist with the most weeks at number 1. The song would also earn ZICO his first music show wins since Any Song. It was only 2 wins on Inkigayo, nowhere near as well as Any Song had done, but still, a very decent number for a man who does not often win on music shows. Now, if we look at Spot from a more international view, this song did great on streaming. Okay, starting Spotify, it became ZICO's second song to clear 100 million streams, probably in part because Jennie was in it and Blackpink is Blackpink, but even so, it has around 140 million streams as of me filming this, which is a great number for someone like ZICO. Meanwhile, over on YouTube, the music video has 94 million views as of me filming this, and the audio track has another 67 million, so in short, the song is doing exceedingly well. And that brings us to the present. We have officially reached the present day, and ZICO would just spend the next few months essentially making bank off Spot and hosting his show. Like, he was living his best life. And again, that brings us to today. Looking to the future, Block B did have a reunion on ZICO's show. There are currently rumors swirling that they're going to release a new album. Nothing's been announced yet, but who knows? I'm sure he will be heavily involved if they do put something out, and I am curious to see how it would do, but in terms of official lore, ZICO's kinda chillin' for now. However, before we finish, I actually want to do a quick career highlights moment. In spite of me having 25 pages of notes and having been sitting in this room for approximately 3 hours, I still feel like it has not fully sunk in how massive of an artist ZICO is. So, let's start with weeks at number 1. ZICO has put out 6 number 1 singles on the Gaon charts and 5 number 1 singles on the Melon charts. His total time at number 1, at least on the Melon charts, comes out to 19 weeks at number 1, which puts him ahead in the ranking of Bangtan, Twice, and IVE, all of whom have 17 weeks. Also, that's 6/5. That doesn't include songs he's written for other artists, or his features, or his time with Block B. Moving on to top 10 singles. Again, just as a lead artist, ZICO has 23 singles that have peaked in the top 10 of the Gaon charts. For a frame of reference, Bangtan, as a group, has 25. So, 23, insane. Now, let's talk digital sales. As a lead or featured artist, ZICO has sold 18 million downloads. Now, to be clear, that number is only up until 2017. I do not have sales numbers for anything after 2018, which means songs like Any Song, New Thing, and Spot are all not included in that number. Additionally, that 18 million does not include any of his work with Block B, who have sold millions more. And in spite of that, 18 million downloads makes him one of the highest selling digital artists of the 2010s. In short, ZICO is a god tier soloist. This man is so insanely successful. He is easily one of the biggest artists I've covered in my little history of series. Like, this man is massive. And yeah, thank you for watching. I'm still curious to see how long this video will be. I could see it being longer than Block B. My notes are about equal between the two, so who knows. But I appreciate you sitting through it if you made it this far. I love you so much. You can like and subscribe if you want to, or don't. I will be okay either way. In the description, I will be putting a few things. Okay, first, I will put a link directly to my history of Block B, so you can watch that video if you so choose. I will also just have a playlist of my entire history of series. There's a lot in there. They are of varying styles over the years. My slideshow ones, however, have been like the past year or so, and you can watch them if you want to. I don't know what to tell you. You can also comment whatever you want. Comment what I missed. Comment your favorite ZICO song. Comment your least favorite ZICO song. I don't care what you comment. You can comment what you want. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's it. So yeah, thank you again for watching. Bye!